Yes, guys, I'm Si. Welcome to Cardiff City World for another episode of the Breakdown Podcast, where we do exactly what it says on the tin. We break it down. Used to be 5 things we learned from the games, but wanted to shy away a little bit from that because I didn't want to pigeonhole it to just the game before. Although we will obviously talk about that in a great deal of detail. But tonight, the subject is kind of as it says in the title: no footballing structure. No matter, is it the manager's fault? Is it the player's fault? Is it the board's fault? What is going wrong with Cardiff City? Where does the blame lie? Is it just a general issue, or is it a manager issue? But I'm keen for everyone to have their say, so please drop all your views in the comments. And at the end of the day, all views are welcome, as long as you're not a knobhead about it. I got no problem. In fact, I have a lot more fun sometimes when people disagree with me. But I am delighted to be joined once again by Mr. Jamie Anderson. How are you, mates?
Good, mate. How are you doing? You okay?
I'm good. I did want to address something earlier. So, just very quickly, I posted earlier something in reply to, I think it was Paul Abandonado, and I just said, basically I said, I've seen a lot of people blaming the board this morning and last night. And I just asked the question what more can the board have done to back Errol Bullitt? Our squad on paper is very good. He's got the players that he wanted. And they've been very patient with the style of play, with the results as well. Back end of last season wasn't great. And I asked the question, and Bob Bank Village, we had a little back and forth. Basically, he's kind of said, with the greatest of respect, you speak to Mehmet Dalman, are you, I can't remember the terminology used, but basically implied or said that, because I speak to him, that means that I can't have a balanced view on it, which I take a bit of objection to, simply because I've been super, super critical of the board and Mehmet Dalman and all of them for the way they've gone about stuff. I just meant in this sole situation with Errol Bullitt, could they have done more, was that, I guess, the question. And also, the reason I can't get current playing squad members on my platforms is because I won't give up my opinion-based content. So it costs me. So I do take a bit of objection to it. But, again, all views are welcome. And I understand why people might think that, but it is what it is. I ain't going to change my view to get access. Don't have access, that's fine. Not bothered. But anyway, back to the main point. Jamie, I'll put that question to you, mate. Could the board have done anything more to back Errol Bullitt or to make his job easier or better? Because obviously, I'll caveat it with, James Rhodri was all agreed and ready to come in as assistant manager in the summer, and Errol Bullitt vetoed that and asked for Omar Reza. By all accounts, it seems like all they've done is argue, but that's another story. Do you think the board could have done more?
When you look at the amount of players we've brought in and the type of players in terms of Chambers and so on, financially, you could probably say no, because, again, they're not coming here for, say, £5,000 a week, are they? So there are elements of it. But on the flip side of it, you have to look at it and say that the types of players, possibly in terms of the way Errol wants to play, how are they fitting in? We've signed players, for example, like Alex Robertson, that, in my opinion, should have been one of the first names on the sheet yesterday. He's shown glimpses already this season that he's probably our most technical midfielder there that is able to dictate play, which we're crying out for. For example, in January, we signed David Turnbull for what was a fee of rumoured £2 million. However, that's paid out, we all don't know. But there are some signings you think, well, why have we signed them and who signed them for what reason? So I think it's one of those ones where you look at it on paper, when we know football's not won on paper, you think, oh, they're good signings. Al Ghazi, great signing, experience. Willett, great signing, But for some reason, something's not quite right. And again, I don't think anyone's exempt from any blame. Yesterday, Errol was in the stands. He's obviously still on the mobile phone. He's still talking to the bench, making decisions. But when players can't pass a ball 5 yards or they're taking the same option, the safe option, something's not quite right there, Si. And to be honest with you, I think in that away end yesterday, the overriding motion was really frustrated because that was a Derby side that were really, really there for the taking. And we just felt like as soon as they banked into their 4-4-2 or whatever it may have been, we just couldn't offer anything.
Yeah, I think I said on the breakfast show this morning, when you lose the players, there's rarely a way back for managers. But when you lose the away fans, you are pretty much done, because they are the loyalists. They're the hardcore ones. They're the ones who spend all their money to go up and down the country, and they're the ones who at the end of last season are, chanting for him to stay. So when you lose them, there's been a big disconnect.
Yeah.
Now, I said to you just before we went live, like I haven't been able to understand the Jack Alnwick thing, because the way Errol Bullock wants to play football, the best keeper to play that style of football is Jack Alnwick, because he's better with his feet. There's not much in his shot stopping wise. But then yesterday, right, and all the away games, we go to away games, we set up to be hard to break down, which admittedly we haven't been this season, but generally we set up to be hard to break down, try and win the ball back, and then hit teams on the break. For that to work, you have to have a midfielder who can thread the ball through and hit those decisive passes when you win the ball back. Now, we struggled with that last year, and that's why a number 9 and a number 8 was so vital to the summer signings. We brought in Alex Robertson, beating a host of other clubs to him. He's young, he's technically good, he works hard, he's got legs, he's aggressive. I don't think he's had a bad performance yet in the Cardiff shirt, but granted, he hasn't had a lot of opportunities. But I also don't think we've seen the best of him. But to me, for an away game particularly, but even just generally speaking, I agree with you, got to be one of the first names on the team sheet. And that was puzzling to me. And I feel like, there were some other puzzling decisions. You got El Ghazi starting for the first time. There's no way El Ghazi's fit to start. No way you're going to see the best of him, because he's barely played football for at least a year.
Yeah.
Then you've got, Joe Rose is coming straight in after being out for, I don't know what it is, 6-8 weeks. So he's not going to be super fit. So straight away, you've got Rose not really fit, El Ghazi not really fit. And then you've also got Gutas, who's been bad this season, to say the least, while you've also got then Will Fish set on the bench. It's puzzling, mate, to say the least. What was your initial thought when you saw the team, the 11 that came out yesterday?
I don't think it was shock. I think Errol had said about the stats and so on, and I think we all knew there would be changes. It was one of those ones when you see Will Fish and stuff like that, you think maybe he could have started at right back, for example, offered something different to Perry NG, because I don't think he played particularly great yesterday. And that's, a couple of times this season. Maybe it's because of the winger that's playing in front of him. I don't know. But there were players I was thinking, I would have possibly liked to see Al Ghazi more centrally to link up with a striker, because I think he's got that in his locker. And when the ball drops into midfield, you need somebody in that area to be creative. But again, it wasn't, even the starting lineup was, what it was. But then the substitutes that were being made were quite confusing, especially when, again, you've got a young, Mike Reindorf, who's, I know he's young, but he's going to give you something. He's going to run, especially with 10 minutes to go when you're chasing the game. And then we bring Kian Ashford on, no disrespect to Kian Ashford, as almost like a false 9. And it was like, I think a lot of people looked at it and went, what are we trying to achieve? We need to score a goal, and we're bringing on a Kian Ashford, and he didn't do too bad. Don't get me wrong; it's not me slating Kian Ashford, but it's at times I think you look at the decisions and you just think, why? What's going on? Why is this player being picked ahead of this player? But again, I'm not there on the training ground, so I think that's what the manager's always saying. I see him Monday to Friday. So again, is that a board thing? Is that a club thing? Or is it something that's happening below that where, generally speaking, the managers and the players are completely off, they've gone off each other, so to say. And yeah, whatever it is 5 games in and we're probably looking worse with every game that goes on.
So one of the things for me is, like, we look as a team, we look uncoached Like, we do not look like a functioning unit. And I'm going to come, there's a couple of comments I want to come to now and answer. But just before that, like, structurally, we look, it's weird, right? Because we look too structured in one way. Like, it looks like the players have got the shackles on and they're not able to express themselves. But equally, in that structure, it's failing because the players look like they don't know what they're doing. Like, even the goal yesterday, it comes across from the sort of our right far too easily. The cross comes in my opinion. But then it goes past Gutas, which I'm not saying he could have got to it, but he doesn't move. And then the striker comes in and strokes it home. And even Chambers doesn't move until the striker's almost hitting the ball. And it's like, I'm not sure Errol Bullock can do that. Like, that is on those three players, like stopping the cross and then the two centre backs. It doesn't make sense to me that those experience, because all three of those players, Perry Ng, Callum Chambers, and Dimitri Gutas, are all like very experienced footballers, so they know what they're doing. And it was very strange. And then you're looking at it and you're thinking, like, Perry Ng has been not up to standard, shall we say, probably since, end of last season, start of this season. Why hasn't he been changed? Why hasn't Siopis been changed? Why was it Robertson that came out and not Siopis? Rawls could have played at 6 quite easily. It's strange. Do you agree with the uncoached thing, mate? Because we just look, the structure's breaking down for me.
Yeah, I mean, again, the one thing that infuriates me to an extent during the game, and I'll be the first one to admit, emotion takes over. So I'm like, oh, why aren't we doing this? But it's the lack of width, the whole sort of overlapping aspect of it. It frustrates me when we are so persistent trying to play through the middle with creating this midfield overload when it's crying out for Callum O'Dowda, for example, to go round and create the 2-on-1 at their right back and vice versa, because their goal came because they did something so simple. And like you said, I think it was Chambers who it appeared like he got sucked in and then he didn't really work back enough. He didn't put an effort to stop the cross. And I'm thinking, you're bottom of the league, albeit after 4 games going into your 5th game, you want to see a bit more effort. You want to see a bit of passion. And for them, the goal to be conceded like that, it was from a Derby perspective, it's a great goal, it's well worked. But from a defensive perspective, like you say, you surely would think that they're teaching that on the training ground when, a ball's being hit across the other side. What are they doing? But whatever's being taught on the training ground side, I don't think is being replicated in the games. And if it is, it's not being done to a good enough standard in the games where obviously then sides are scoring 1 goal and almost just being defensively sound. And I think that's enough for them just to get the results.
Yeah, sorry, I got the personnel wrong when I was describing the goal, like of who was where. But like the point stands, like the Chambers had got sucked over to the right and whatnot. But like, so like Paul says there, the biggest problem is obvious fitness, and that is mad when you think the assistant manager we brought in is a big part of his job, of his role in previous jobs. It's been fitness coach, and we look unfit.
I don't know how it is, and this is not just this year, Si. I think a lot of people were saying we're almost sick no FC because for whatever reason, whether it's like you say mismanagement of players, not necessarily from an Errol perspective, but from a medical department, players are going away, like you discussed last week, even if they're not featuring many minutes for their internationals, they're coming back and then they're unavailable because they're tired or their hamstrings are tight and so on. And I understand that. But when you've got key players like Callum Robinson, who is by far our best option at number 9, who, as someone said, I think he had a knock in training on the Friday, you think to yourself, well, if these players are going on international duty, what are we doing in training? Are we overloading the players in training so they're unfit and they get these these injuries? It's really frustrating because I see sides, Simon, and they're constantly running, and I look at us and I think at times, why is their number 6 able to go from left to right so quickly? Because maybe that's because they're demanded to do that, whereas we seem very, very lethargic and quite slow at times when we're either passing the ball or out of possession. It doesn't seem like we're at it, so to say.
But I also think on the number 6 thing, I think it's because Siopis goes wandering. When Siopis first came in, and he was just sitting there, and he was going side to side, and he started to do it again at the end of last season. When the example I always use is when Tanner played at left back, and he got caught upfield a couple of times, and Siopis came across, swept up, and that's all you want him to do. But he's got this thing in his head that he's got to play the Hollywood pass, and he's got to be everywhere. Whereas actually, you just want him to hold the centre of the pitch and protect the centre backs. I just want to go through a couple of these comments because a couple of interesting ones. The fisherman, who I think is probably in the minority now, but he says, I'd still give Errol a few games yet. So my worry with that is we got quite tough run, like 3 or 4 games coming up now. If we lose the next 3 or 4 and get cut adrift at the bottom, then it becomes a whole different story for the season. Because once you get cut adrift by 6-7 points in this league, it's hard to get that momentum up to then push on and be safe. Whereas, and I didn't think I would be saying that this. Certainly didn't think I'd be saying it this early in the season. But what I've seen in the last 2 games, is such a breakdown between the manager and what we're seeing on the pitch that I think we need to get rid of him before the Leeds game. Unfortunately, I don't like even saying it or talking about it because it's someone's job at the end of the day. But for the good of the club, I think you have to move on and you have to get someone in who's going to utilize this squad the way it should be. Because this squad, you don't play football on paper, of course, but this squad is real strong. When you compare it to some others, it's real strong. And my worry is, like I say, if you stick with him for 3 or 4 games, that could put you in a bit of a downward slide. But equally, if you get someone in and you get the new manager bounce and he releases this squad a little bit, gets them playing, there's enough time to really have a decent season. Like there's loads of time left. It's difficult, isn't it?
It very is. And again, I think a lot of fans probably, I mean, again, the whole appointment or the reappointment was, it wasn't as if it was a unanimous decision. I think certain fans still had skepticism about the way he was playing. He did come out and say, I'm going to be, I want this sort of type of fast football. I want to be expansive and so on. So I think it was a good commercial pitch for fans. Okay, we'll give you time. But in this league, it's ruthless. On paper, again, I use that term. I know games aren't won on paper, but when we look at the fixture sheets, we knew the first 4 games prior to the international break were very, very tough. And this was our, quote, winnable game, as people said, oh, yeah, Derby's probably our first winnable game. And bar a few half chances, we didn't look like winning it. We genuinely didn't look like it. And Derby fans were saying to me after the game on the way home, they were like, oh, you look like a good football inside. And I said, that's fine. But it's good having a couple of 100 passes or whatever it may be. But if there's no end product, sides aren't really having to do a lot to beat us. And that's a worry because, again, the longer it goes on, the more pressure comes from fans to management, to the club. Obviously, it's a massive week, for us paying respects and, on Saturday. I personally don't want the whole occasion to be overshadowed and to mar what is going to be us showing some sort of respect to Sol as well. So we don't want that negativity creeping in. But something has to change. It's not right. If you're not changing Errol, then something internally needs to change because whatever it's Errol's tactics, whether it's the coaches, whether it's just the players, something's not right. We're never going to know the full, extremities of it. I know the whole situation has come on Twitter this morning and so on. It just seems like there's always a dark cloud over our football club. We need to get that win ASAP side because the longer it goes on, the pressure keeps growing, doesn't it?
Do you know what's mad, mate? Is say 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, I was going into this season the most positive I could remember in recent times about the signings. I thought the club, and this is what I was going back to what I was saying about the board. Like I'm not sticking up for them because one of my biggest issues with our club is the lack of football structure, which I will touch on a bit later. But I thought we moved quickly. We got the right quality of player. And we did what we needed to do. Like we improved areas we need to improve. I think the one decision you can kind of question in the transfer window where you can go is having too many players. So you had to send that striker on loan. That's mental to me. But these players have got contracts, mate. You can't just, like, they got contracts. Just because you want them to move on doesn't mean they will. And unfortunately, that's kind of how it played out. I just want to answer this question, mate, and then I want to ask you about Wilfred Kanga. But Paul says, question to you, Zion. You kind of tactician and you talk about the tactics on the podcast. You know this formation is wrong for our players. They're not fit enough to play it. So why are they continuing to play it, even under fire? Well, I said in pre-season, because of the signings he'd made, I wondered whether he was going to revert back to a system that he used a couple of times in Turkey, which was a kind of 3-4-2-1 or a 3-5-2. Because I was just thinking, the way I was looking at it is, I know he's a big fan of Pacquiao, but he probably doesn't trust him defensively in the championship, which is fine. I understand that. But he also signed Chambers, Fish, and Darland, all of which haven't come to sit on the bench. So I was like, well, maybe he's going to switch the system because that will allow us to be a bit more expansive and maybe suits the players a bit better. But there's been no sign of that outside of the EFL Cup games. But for me, mate, going back to something you said about other teams looking energetic and like they've got legs. Other teams, so use Sunderland as an example, they've got a 17-year-old who's really highly rated. He starts football matches. We've got Conte, who impressed at the end of last season, did well in pre-season, is very versatile, and we've sent him on loan to, what was it, a League Two or a non-league team. You've got Eli. Go on.
Woking, I think it was, in the conference.
Yeah. You've got Eli King, who could be an alternative to Siopis, who would be a bit more legs, physical, decent enough on the ball, certainly no worse than Siopis on the ball. Gone on loan. Then you've got Pacquiao, can't get a look in. You've got Ruben Colwell, probably played this week because of the injury to Aaron Ramsey, if we're honest. I don't think anyone thought he was going to drop Ramsey otherwise. Who else is there? Like, you know, there's other youngsters, like Louis Giles. Like these kids are highly rated. When they've come in, they've done a good job. Now, I'm not saying chuck them all in at the deep end, but I'm saying like none of them have got any minutes apart from Ruben this season, apart from in the EFL Cup. And you're looking at it and you're thinking, well, all right, they are young. But ultimately, what's that old adage? If you're good enough, you're old enough. But we'll never know because we never give them first team opportunities. And to be honest with you, mate, quite frankly, they cannot be any worse than what we've been in every single game this season, other than the EFL Cup games and the second half versus the Jacks. Apart from those instances, we've been dreadful all the way through. Half an hour against Burnley. So are they going to be any worse? I don't think so.
No, and again, I think you mentioned it before, where every club wants one of their own, and they love nothing more than one of their own. And especially when you see the likes of, for example, Isaac Davis have pictures from when he was at Wembley when he was young, supporting Cardiff City. You know that they live and breathe the club. I think for us at the minute is, like you say, is the only way we look like scoring. It's not even. I don't even think it's from set pieces anymore, because I don't think we're as our deliveries haven't been terrific. They've been way off it from set pieces. We wasted a lot of crossing opportunities yesterday. Was I think the only way we look like scoring is when a game is really, really stretched. So there's almost no structure. It's just it's allowing the likes of Ruben Colwell to have
free for all,
no. Yeah, and again, it felt like that at times when we created the chance with Ruben Colwell yesterday in the first, I think it was 15 minutes. It was because the game was so open. But when sides tend to structure games, they seem to know their roles. Their players are sort of instructed, and you can see opposition managers shouting, screaming, right, you've got to stay there. With us, I mean, obviously you've mentioned Siopis. I think Siopis his game is not like to play 50-yard passes. We don't want him doing that. But maybe mentally he's thinking, well, who else is going to do it? And he's trying to do three people's jobs. And the problem is they're not actually thinking, in my opinion, I don't think they're thinking almost correctly as to what they need to do. Their emotions or whatever, they're hearing the crowd on them. they're just doing the safe options. They're passing it backwards, or they're seeing someone like, I don't know, a Darling behind them. Oh, you can have it. We need players to drive the ball. We need players not to be afraid. And like you said, the youngsters, yes, they're going to make mistakes, but if they're not given the opportunities, then by 21 years old, 22, when they should be around the first team, what's the point? Is you've got an academy for a reason. And yeah, yesterday, the example was, for me, was Mike Raindorf. Why not give him 10 minutes off the bench at the end game? He showed in spells against Southampton that he has something about him. Yes, he's raw, but he could have run into Curtis Nelson or Nat Phillips. He could have got us a free kick. He could have done something different. But yeah, maybe that's something that the club need to look at, is saying, well, why aren't these youngsters being given the exposure that they need?
Indeed, mate. I've just put a poll on the YouTube live chat asking what the overall feeling is regarding Errol Bullitt and would you keep him for the Leeds game. So please do give that a little click. So yeah, like Wilfred Kanga, mate, is an interesting one, right? Because I said a couple of weeks back, you've got to give him time. He's clearly not fit. I felt sorry for him because I felt like he would have benefited more from 20 minutes at the end against tired defenders, maybe grab a goal, get his confidence up. But I just feel like he plays an hour, doesn't score, his confidence, his head drops, etc. But the last two games against Middlesbrough and Derby, particularly, but probably overall, he looks like he doesn't want to be there. He looks like he's not interested. He hasn't bought into the cause, if you like. He's not fighting for the ball. He's not running around. That's a big issue for me. Like, the least I'm looking for him to do is press and run around and put himself. He's a big boy. Put himself about a little bit. Let the centre backs know they've been in a battle, and we're so easy to play against. And a large part of that comes from that front man. And like you mentioned, you've got Reindorf, who, all right, is probably raw and not ready for Championship football. But the one thing he does do is he runs around, he runs at people, he runs in behind. And when those centre-backs come off the pitch, it might not be the hardest game they've ever had technically, but they'll know that they've been in a battle. They'll be tired. They'll be exhausted. It's bizarre to me, mate. The Keane Ashford thing coming on for Kanga, I did think it was bizarre. I actually don't think Keane Ashford as a kind of false nine with Ruben. I would actually do it the other way around. I'd have Ruben as a false nine with Keane playing as like a deeper striker and them kind of interchanging. I said that last year. I think that could work well against certain teams. But this is the thing which I think where I think Errol Bullitt's lost his way a little bit. Start last season when we did well under him. Each game he took, and it was clear that he'd researched the opposition and he had a plan for that opposition. He might tweak a little bit the personnel, the position slightly, the way they were setting up, the possession, like the position out of play or whatever. But this, or certainly from Christmas onwards last year, that was out the window. It was just 4-2-3-1, or basically 4-5-1, sometimes 4-6-0, and there's no desire to win the game. We are just playing to not lose, and that's a big issue for me. So I believe we could have prime Ronaldo 9 up front, and literally he would look average, but I'd still expect him to run around.
Yeah, I think someone said to me in the stand yesterday, the term he used was a striker's graveyard. He said because it seems no matter who we sign as a striker, especially when our strikers seem to be on loan, like you mentioned there's a few things we want to see is effort, desire, and yeah, of course you want quality, but they're the fundamentals. You want to see the effort, you want to see the pressing, you want to see it, because I know Errol mentioned at the beginning of the season that he wants to press from the front. And the only person I think at the minute who does that for us, and unfortunately he's been, he's injured again, hopefully not too bad, was Robinson. Because when Robinson presses from the front, everyone else steps up, and it seems like, we kind of, we're a bit more sturdy, so to say, and we're pressing teams as opposed to being pressed ourselves. But it is a worry because, again, whenever you sign loan players, you run that risk of, they're only loanees. They're not fully invested in the football club. Are they going to be wanting to die for the badge, so to say? Because, let's be honest, they're on loan. They're not going to do it. I mean, I watched him yesterday, and there were certain things he did well, where he was kind of holding the ball up or trying to hold the ball up. But when it was the little bits of when to pass, when to release the ball, just around the corner to Ruben, for example, the type of pass, it was too hard. His touch then started to think, and I think to myself, is that confidence or is that quality? And at the minute, I don't think many of the players can say, well, they certainly haven't got confidence, and that's not helping at all, having no confidence. But quality, they're not showing it. And unfortunately, you need to have those moments of quality that will win you games. And we're not having quality because, well, I don't know if it's players shying away, if it's players not necessarily doing the basics correctly, or they just don't, they just can't play into this tactic. Because we see managers prior to it, when they've played wing backs, for example, and they've been insisting on playing certain formations, players just don't buy into it. They can't do it, or they just kind of say, well, that's not our thing. So maybe we've got to change formation. So I don't know, but we're 5 games in and we're playing, like you say, the same way, just with little tweaks here and there, but none of it's working at the minute. So something needs to change, because when Leeds United come to town on Saturday, yeah, it's not going to be particularly great if we play that way.
What makes it difficult as well is you've got a defensive manager who's going to set up defensively solid and hope that he can hit something on the break, which in theory isn't the worst plan, particularly for away games in the Championship. The problem this season is that we're not defensively solid and we're making really, really silly mistakes. Darland came in and I thought, right, here we go. Not only is he an excellent defender, but he's a real good passer of the football. This could be the sign-in, because I'm looking at the spine and I'm thinking, well, Darland's good defensively, but he can play a nice pass like McGuinness could, which will find Robertson, who can then play that sort of creative pass. And then you look at it and he'll find Colwell, and then you look at it and Robertson's on the bench, Colwell's on the bench, Darland's injured, and you're just like, I said about a month ago, if Errol Bullitt ends up losing his job, it will be because Errol Bullitt has refused to change, and his stubbornness will be his downfall. And I do stand by that. But I also think one of the issues, and I think this is the club's issue with him, and this is not based on any sort of information, it's just a kind of observation. I know they had at least 2 meetings with him, one at the end of last season, one around the time he signed his contract. And they told him, the style of football needs to be more expansive, more aggressive, especially at home. That hasn't arrived. So from their point of view, they've backed him.
Yeah.
They've given him the players to do it, because I guarantee you, if you put, who could we use as an example? Let's just say Craig Bellamy, right? If Craig Bellamy was in charge of Cardiff for 2 weeks, I guarantee he would get a tune out of these players just by the style of play, and he would install confidence, pressing, and certain fundamentals which would get more out of the team. So if you're the board, or you're the people at the top of the club, you must be losing patience, because he's not doing what he said he would, which is be more attacking. Now, where you can talk about the quality and he hasn't tried to do it, mate, in my opinion. He hasn't tried to be more expansive. No, I haven't seen one sign of it, because all that, the shape change in pre-season was abandoned for the Sunderland game. So that 5 at the front and all that, it was gone.
I was a bit disappointed yesterday, because when you see the likes of, like you say, Callum O'Dowd in his natural position now as a left winger, I really was hoping that I'd see the Callum O'Dowd that we know can do it, which is get at your right back, at your at the defender, take the ball past them, whip it in the box, just do the basics. But it didn't feel like down that left-hand side, they weren't really doing a lot down his left-hand side, whether that's because he was playing with Bagan, I'm not too sure. But it always seemed to be that the pass would go infield again. And then you got someone then playing almost like off a triangle. It was almost like they were doing a dot to dot, where they would pass it in to pass back to go across. Whereas, Derby, for example, weren't afraid to go long and almost play the corner flag, because they knew that, well, hang on, we can either get a throw and we can get something, but just putting pressure and turning defenders the other way is going to tire them out. It's going to allow them to reset. And I think for us at the minute, we're kind of caught in a well, again, I keep saying confidence. I know confidence is something that you can make your own confidence. You can hear it in press conferences. We know what we need to do, but there's saying and there's doing. And when you see players, for example, taking the easy option, as a lot of people say, or going backwards as a winger, that doesn't show me or any fan confidence. That almost feels like it's either being told that you've got to do that, because I think when I look at this going inverted wingers and stuff like that, side, you've got to have mobile players in that middle of the park, because otherwise what's going to happen? They're all going to stand on each other's toes. And that's what they're doing. I noticed yesterday they were going in twos or threes or whatever it may be into certain areas. And what we were doing is we were kind of overcrowding ourselves, so that our players were almost running into trouble. So then we had no one then in the central areas, because it was all, it was a lack of structure. But he has to change the formation. And if he doesn't change the formation, people will ask the question, why? We're at home. Why are we playing at home with two holding midfielders, for example, when you told fans that you're going to be more sort of attacking, you're going to be in the faces of people. And it's not me or yourself sort of bullet out or slandering the club or anything like that. It's things that have been said to the press in interviews. It's things that we've all heard from the horse's mouth. So we've heard the talk, but now we need to see the walk, if that makes sense. Because again, someone said this is like Titanic. It's the ship is slowly sinking, and when there's a lot more water coming on this ship, so to say, how long is it going to be before it's too much? And I genuinely am worried, because we never play well against Hull, for example. So going to Hull on a Saturday is never easy. Playing against Leeds is not easy. Even Millwall, they're not easy, because you can't really say in the Championship, oh yeah, we'll win that game, it's okay, because we've shown we can't, and anyone can beat anyone. So we've really got to find something within, because if we can't find it within, then we've got to look outside, haven't we?
Got to. And like, how difficult is it though for players like? Well, just going before I go to that, like you said about the wingers, yeah, it's got to be tactical. It's got to be coached into them to not give the ball away. And they're so scared to give the ball away and then get hauled off because they've given the ball away. So they don't try and beat their man. They just keep the ball and go backwards. Like Tanner, first game of the season against Sunderland was horrific. And I slated him quite openly, and I rated him, I think, a 2 out of 10. He was awful. Since then, he's been direct. He's been energetic. He's worked hard. He's been really, really skillful at what you want from a winger. And then yesterday, back to the complete opposite. That's got to be tactical. Same with O'Dowda. Now, maybe with O'Dowda, there's a bit of kind of layover from where he's been playing fullback, and he's kind of just got into some bad habits. But for me, I've been very, very patient. I think I've been very fair to Errol Bullock. But for me now, I look at it and I just think these players aren't playing for him, regardless of, some of them will still maybe be on board with him. Some of them will be all right with him, and, they won't hate him. Some of them probably, I don't think, they probably disagree with the tactics or whatever it may be. But I just can't see, if he doesn't change something drastically, I can't see how he survives and gets us playing and gets us going. The only way he survives is by winning games. And the only way we win games is if he changes something. And I said it the other day, when people are under stress and pressure, they revert to type.
Yeah.
His type is 4-2-3-1, experienced players, try to be difficult to break down. When actually, I think what this squad needs is a bit of bravery, a bit of aggression, some ball carriers, and I want to, if Ruben Caldwell's got a ball, I want to see 2-3 players running beyond him, giving him an option. I don't want to see players hiding, go backwards. Let's keep the ball. And also, sorry, mate, that's what I was going to ask you. So I yesterday's show and on Thursdays, sorry, I'm jumping around. I was reading the thing. So this year in the Premier League and the Championship, there's been a real uptake in the amount of goals scored by teams trying to play out from the back. It's like a high percentage of goals. Even yesterday, you can go see it. And the only team yesterday, which I saw in the Premier League, who did something different and went a bit direct, was Man City. when they were going direct to Haaland and then playing off him. There's a difference between hoofing the ball into the channels and playing the percentages and being like a long ball team, which we've seen before. And I don't think anyone wants to go back to that. There's a difference between that and passing or playing long passes to your striker, your number 10, your wingers, and then playing football off them to avoid the press. But we are so insistent on playing through the press that we end up just going sideways and backwards. And teams don't even press us properly now. They just keep their shape and they know we'll just go backwards. Looking at the poll, mate. Go on, you go.
Straight in, because I just seen some of the comments there. The thing is, like, a few of the guys are saying wingers not being high enough at the pitch. Is that a coaching thing, or is that the way our game is? Are they coming deeper just because they want to get the ball? But then, let's be honest, if you're too deep, you've got a lot more to do. My big worry is it feels like as a club, we go back to the same chapter every year or every few years. Players may change, but it feels like the club aren't. And I know a lot of fans are like, why aren't we getting a director of football in and so on and so forth? So again, we talk about the board and so on. That probably will never happen. And a lot of fans say about stubbornness. I think there is an element of stubbornness at our football club, whether that's from the hierarchy or whether that's from the change room. There's a stubbornness of, almost, I'm not willing to do it. Again, is he willing to change these tactics that are staring him glaringly in the eyes? Because again, if I'm an opposition manager, I'm saying to my team straight away, right, a striker to press, just keep running, because one of the centre halves is guaranteed to mess up under pressure. And if you score a goal, you probably won't get about a few set pieces. If you don't give stupid bloody free kicks away, you're not really going to be threatened. And that's a worry for me because, again, you're seeing all the comments coming through about losing the dressing room. If that is the case, then no manager should be in the job because, again, you've got, 27 players, 25 players that you've got to manage. Managing is not just on the field. It's off the field. It's making sure that player, the player is like, obviously Errol's been criticised for the way he talked about Ollie Tanner. And again, you can be on both sides of the fence that. But these players train every day. They have to turn up to training and they have to be fit. If they're not living a good lifestyle and they're not fully invested, then there needs to be something done about it. And vice versa, if the manager isn't, sort of catering for his players, then something needs to be done because ultimately you're all paid to do a job. You're all paid to deliver this project that you've told people you're going to deliver. And if you're not producing the project or the product on the pitch, then the paying person, or as we've been alluded to as customers, fans aren't going to tolerate that. Again, home attendances will probably start dwindling. Away fans won't be happy like they weren't yesterday. And I know there's a bit of divide saying about booing and so on, but each their own. But ultimately, you've all paid a lot of money yesterday to go and follow a team that really didn't, they didn't offer a lot. And that was disappointing yesterday. I think we said disappointing every game, frustrated. They're not good things to have, Si.
No, mate, I agree with you. I want to finish off, mate, on the lack of football structure. It's something which I've bemoaned and criticised the club for such a long time. Feel like I'm repeating myself, but I haven't talked about it for a little bit, so we'll talk about it again. But basically, right, away from football, Vincent Tan is a very, very successful businessman. He's a rich man, okay? So what I don't understand, I bet you I would imagine in any other business that he owns and runs, he employs the experts in their field to do particular jobs. Like he's not going to fix the IT bit. He's not doing the commercial bit. He gets people to do those jobs because they're experts in their field, and he will employ the best person in that field for each job, for each business. Mm-hmm. So why haven't Cardiff City got a football structure? Well, there's the obvious that Ian Moody burnt his fingers and he doesn't want to go back to that. I understand it to a certain degree. Like, did he got his fingers burnt with it? And I think he probably got his ego bruised a little bit as well. But the money that was wasted under Ian Moody on certain signings, since then, we've wasted way more. on signings and wages and players who were never ever good enough or didn't want to be here, or all sorts of different reasons that go into a football club. So to me, when you've got a chairman who's not there every day, you've got, I don't know what Kenneth Cho's actual job is, but you've got Kenneth Cho is obviously not there every day. Steve Borley, is on the board, but he's not there every day, and he certainly doesn't, run the club. But even the chairman's got no real power, and this is, I think people forget this. Like, he can't put a director of football in, or a football structure, or a technical director, or whatever, without Vincent's hand say so. It's on Vincent's hand to do so. Now, some people will say he's lost interest. I would argue that you don't spend the amount of money on wages and signings that he has this summer if you've lost interest. But equally, the lack of footballing structure between the board and the team will continue to bite us on the arse until it's fixed. And I don't care who the owner is or who the manager is, that will always be a problem, because there's no one at the club running it day to day, and there's no one with a genuine football knowledge who's in charge of football things. Nobody on that board has got football knowledge. Like, yes, Mehmet Dalman's been involved in football for a while, Steve Borley the same, but like, they're not football people, with the greatest of respect. Successful businessmen, whatever, fine, but they're not football people. They haven't got an inside mind to the way the game works on and off the pitch. So why isn't there someone there? And also, do you think that it's going to be an ongoing problem for us until it's addressed?
I think there is. I mean, again, it's you look at it from both sides of things, don't you? You say ultimately, surely, that from a football operations perspective, or in any business, any whatever you want to call it, there'll be head of faculties and there'll be someone liaising someone else, but they're all relevant in their areas, like you said. Now, I think a lot of people have said about director of football, like you mentioned there, about the amount of money that we've probably wasted in terms of wages and transfer fees. And surely, well, it wouldn't be the same in terms of salary for a director of football, but that person can solely deliver a report monthly, whatever it may be about, whatever it may be about players and so on and so forth. I think this upcoming season we're losing, is it upwards of 8 or 9 players out of contract, if not more? Now, a lot of people said yesterday, it seems to be, it's a short-term vision, and they talk about a long-term plan, but we're kind of in the middle of it. Oh, it's great we're signing players that are developing, and we've got great academy players, but then we're losing games in the middle. So how do you bring that together? Well, a director of football or a technical director would be able to do that. And I think this is the problem, I think, at the minute is you can't afford loyalty in football, because, again, whoever it is, you're paid to do a job, you're paid to get results. Being sat at the bottom of the league, 3 points adrift already, with the worst goal difference in the league, they're not good statistics. They look really poor. Yes, one win can prepare you. I completely understand that. But as we sit here now, you could argue that all the recruitment that we did in the summer is pointless, because nothing has progressed. Nothing has progressed since we played Rotherham away last year. At the end of the season, and it really does feel like that. Yes, we signed players, but what else did we do? Why have we told players that we're telling teams that we're playing inverted wingers? And the club, I think, does need to be more modernised. It's not a shame to say you've got a director of football. It's not an anomaly, is it? A lot of teams have it.
We're one of the few clubs who don't have it, I think, aren't we?
Yeah. And again, the more successful sides who, years ago, for example, like a Brentford or a Brighton, they only became more successful because they employed people like a director of football, or a sort of a board area, or a faculty, whatever you want to call it, of people who are able to do footballing reports. And that is what helped have a good business model. And it all kind of interlined. We're signing this player because he's a progressive attacking midfielder, he can cater the 4-2-3-1, whatever it may be. But I think it is screaming out for something like that. And will we ever get it? I'd probably say no. But I think everyone would say, I mean, people were saying, get Steve McPhail in from Shamrock Rovers and so on. Not a bad shout. But again, we don't make those decisions. And until somebody, decides that it's a thing that we need, it feels like it's going on, it's going in there and out the other way.
Yeah, on the poll, I said, would you stick with Errol Bullock for the Leeds game? 22% yes, 78% no. So I'm going to end that now. I'm also interested in, look, if the club was to part ways with Errol Bullock before the Leeds game, what do you guys think the plan should be? Should it be, I've seen a lot of people saying Aaron Ramsey as an interim player manager. And last night, that rumor was strong. So I checked it with someone who would know. And they said it's not the case. So, but that doesn't mean it won't be the case. It just means it wasn't the case last night. In my opinion, it's important that we get the right manager now. I hope they don't rush into it and go backwards and go for the kind of Mick McCarthy style, Neil Harris, these types. They'd be such a backward step to do that. In my opinion, I'll tell you who I think is a good outside shout. Not saying that I want him, but I think if I was a betting man, would be a good outside bet to be the next Cardiff manager, and that's Des Buckingham, from previously with Oxford. Was linked with the Wales job. I could very well see him being someone that the club would just consider. Now, whether he'd be interested in the rest of it is another thing. I think Tony Mowbray, if he's well enough and back to it, would be a good choice. I think, who else did I say? The guy from Wycombe Wanderers, who I can't remember his name now, Bloomfield, would be a good shout. Another outside bet, which I think would be all right, and it's got a little bit of a link to the club, is Gareth Ainsworth. I know he's gone off the boil a little bit since a few years ago, but I like the way he goes. I'm not saying he should have it, by the way. I'm just kind of throwing some names out there. But I like the way he goes about his football. He's very positive and very, he wants to play attacking football, and he would get the fans away. I don't think it's going to be him. And I'm on about as an interim, by the way, not as a manager, because I think what we'll see is an interim manager for a short term, whoever it may be. So that's what I'm on about with Gareth Ainsworth. Aaron Ramsey is like a player manager, possibly as an interim. I don't think that's the right choice personally. Nothing against Aaron Ramsey. I'm not sure that he's the right guy for it. But then it's like, who'd you go with? Realistically, if we have an interim manager, which I believe will be the case, you're probably looking at Aaron Ramsey, Darren Pearce.
It's frustrating. It's a merry-go-round because, again, for whatever reason, a manager, if they lose a dressing room, hasn't done something right. Players ain't happy, players revolt. But then the next person who comes in has to do the same thing. He can't, for example, then come in and then allow, I don't know, hypothetically, let's say a Wintle that, is documented about him. Okay, we're going to give you what you want, because other players then in their right mind will go, hang on a minute. If he kicks off or someone kicks off, I can kick off. And it sets a bad tone. I think whoever you bring in has to have a no-nonsense approach. It has to be their way. I know it's probably been that case with Errol to an extent, and certain players probably haven't liked that. But you can't go and get a type of manager now that is going to be direct, whether it's for 6 months or not, or whatever it may be. And also, if you were to change things, we've seen it in the past, there's been no plan. So I think that's important, as much as this short term, because it would only be a short term appointment, in my opinion. It should be anyway. You need to get something in place that you say, right, in 5 months' time, for example, we're having this man, we've got this in place, we've got all this, because otherwise you're just going to keep going around the roundabout like we seem to be doing it was a bit shorter, but is it 13, 14 months he's had the job now? So again, it doesn't look good on paper. Yes, we're a big club, as people keep saying, Cardiff's a big club. But fans are really, really loyal, and that sounds daft, but there was 1,900 fans up there yesterday, and and to be fair, they were trying their hardest to get behind the team. And they were quite right to voice their frustrations, because again, fans are there they're there to support the club. They're invested in the club. It's a family tradition. It's something that can change somebody's week going to the football. But when you see performances or lack of performance that we're seeing now, it's not great. It really isn't great. It's not enjoyable. I think that's the one thing at the minute. It doesn't feel enjoyable. And the manager coming in has to have, I think, a connection with the fans. Errol, to an extent, I think, did well when he first came in, when he was going around the valleys and so on. I think that may have helped him with a smaller section of fans, because he did that. But see some of the names in here. I know people are saying Ryan Lowe and so that sort of mentions like that. Whoever comes in has to put something in place and say, listen, it's my way. This is the way we're going to play, but also have knowledge that we can't play 4-2-3-1 because
Sorry, mate. I just seen a comment from Paul, and my head's about to fall off. He said Frank Lampard's idea. I can't even discuss that. Like, oh my good God.
I mean, you see the names there. Ishmael,
Nathan
not bad.
Jones, if you want someone to unite the fans, I think you go with Nathan Jones.
But would he leave Charlton with the way they're playing? Yeah, again, it depends, doesn't it? I suppose you've got the likes of Jukanovic, the old school Championship names. They've got Fulham, they got the CVs, but again, it can go either way. It can really go either way, and they're going to probably want it. It's going to sound daft, but these managers coming in, they'll probably want to sign their own players in January, or And again, you've got an overinflated squad as it is. We struggled, if anything, to get rid of players in the summer. So they're going to have to work with what they've got. So there's going to be no excuses.
Do you know what I would say, though, mate? Right, if I say I was like a youngish attacking manager who liked to play football a certain way, and I saw Cardiff City's squad, and the first thing I would say, right, if you let me sign, if you can get a couple out and we can get an out-and-out proven Championship striker in January, then I will take this job. Because I would look at that squad and I'd be like, there's some real players in there, mate, who under the right manager could do some real damage. But what I will say, the difference, I think, now to maybe when Errol Bullock came in, for instance, I think there's many more managers who are available at the moment, like good managers, Tony Mowbray's, and then you obviously have your people like, you're going to get Sam Allardyce, Nathan Jones, Ryan Lowe, Liam Rosenior. They're all going to get linked, aren't they? But I do think there's some good managers out there. It's whether we've got the people at the club, in the board, who are going to pick them, mate. Like Graham Potter, someone said earlier, Graham Potter. I think Graham Potter would be a fantastic shout if we had any football people in the board. What I don't want to see is Alex Neil, David Wagner, like Warnock, these types of managers. Gary Rowett is a shout. I saw someone say that just now, and like I wouldn't personally want to see like Wagner and that. I don't think that's the way to go, but everyone's entitled to an opinion. Rowett would be good.
I think the thing is as well is that the key focus here as well is we all would love to see some sort of change. That's what we're dying out for. Ideally, you'd love to say, oh my goodness, Errol's come and started playing a 3-5-2 and we're at it. It could be such a quick solution like that, and we wouldn't have to worry about managers coming in and so on and so forth. And again, part of me really hopes that happens, that it's something such a subtle change can work, using the players in the right positions and in the right way. But if we do have to part ways, which, if that does happen, thank you very much for your efforts, Errol, and, and what have you. It has to be someone, like you said, is you can't be saying, oh, we're going to do exactly the same thing, because you're just going to ask for trouble. And you may as well keep the same person in charge that has struggled this season. But again, you're always going to get a new manager bounce anyway from any manager. But it seems to be, I think the old school tracksuit manager is heading and kicking and, on constantly in the players' ears. That's the type of manager I like seeing on the touchline. I would have loved to see, I know Paul Heckingbottom, who's at Preston now, he was a shout in the summer. I thought, do you know what? He's the sort of type of manager that is good with players, but he plays a nice progressive brand of football. But again, we've got a bad reputation, I would say, or not bad reputation, maybe. We haven't got the best of reputations with appointed managers. And especially over recent years, we've probably gone for the cheap option as it's been branded. So if it is to be a parting of ways, we need to make sure that A, it's not the cheap option, and B, it's the right option, I suppose, because again, you've got to work with until at least January with what we've got.
Yeah, I think the most important thing, mate, is we go for a young, progressive manager who plays good football, but also, it's tactically astute enough to know sometimes you've got to shut up shop. Sometimes you've got to be difficult to break down. But, I want to see, I am not interested whatsoever in whether Ruben Colwell can tackle. What I want to see from Ruben Colwell is creating and that bit of magic and let him be like, Ruben Colwell reminds me of someone who would have shone in like the 90s, early 2000s, when you had a lot of like street footballers around Europe, like your Ronaldinhos and your Rooneys, these like kids, like blokes that just wanted to just create something special, your Ronaldos and your Messis, and like they play off the cuff, and not comparing him to them in terms of quality. I'm just saying that like it's like we've got the shackles on all these players who've got a bit of skill and a bit of flair. Even Callum O'Dowda, mate, quality winger, quality footballer on his day, but yeah, we somehow end up with him at left back, and now he doesn't look, or he's certainly on Saturday, he doesn't even look like a winger. Frustrating, mate. Look, we're all frustrated. We're all wanting the best for Cardiff City. I will leave you with one question, mate, because I think I disagree with the masses on this. Would you be happy with Sam Allardyce as the next Cardiff City manager?
Me personally, probably no. And the reason why I'll say that is I think short term that would be fine. It'd be great or whatever. He might get the tune out of the team, which is great. But then I think we're almost reverting back to type of managers that we've had. I don't know, because he's been out of the game for long enough. He may prove me wrong that he's got that in him. He'll have it. What's his name? Little Sammy next to him, probably, to be able to play a way that maybe fans would be happy with. I know a lot of our fans said that they would not be happy with direct football because they suffer. Well, they suffered with it for years. But I think it's that, where do you go? You can't go and get an academy coach from Man City just because Man City play good football. Do you know what I mean? There's a line. I think someone needs to understand the championship for what it is, and like you said earlier, knowing when you have to play away at Middlesbrough on a Wednesday night or whatever it may be, on a Saturday this year, is when you can play and where to play. And I think at the minute we're just we're going round the roundabout, and players are devoid of confidence. Perry Ng is not a bad player. Callum O'Dowda is not a bad player. These players are good players, but when they are confident, and anyone will take players on, I just think they're massively, they're struggling at the minute, I think, with confidence. So yeah, Big Sam for me is a no. But hey, stranger things have happened in football side.
Yeah, I admit I don't think he would get it. I don't think the owner would trust him, and I don't think we'd pay his wages either. The only thing I would say on Sam Allardyce is I sometimes don't think he gets the credit that he deserves for some of the stuff he did earlier in his career, like bringing sports science in and some of the players he signed. He's not as one-dimensional as people think. However, I don't think he's the right fit for Cardiff City, and that is ultimately what I care about. But anyway, mate, it's been a pleasure. I wish we had some more positive stuff to talk about. I don't like discussing people's job and stuff, but you can't avoid it. Like, it's bad at the moment. But hopefully we can all get behind the team and give Sol Bamba a real good tribute on Saturday. But Jamie, in the meantime, mate, thank you very much for joining me. I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Appreciate it, mate. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much to the 1,400 and odd people who've been watching live. Please spread the word. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, and that really helps us out. And obviously, word of mouth, spread the word, tell your City friends. Cardiff City content 7 days a week. Tomorrow night, the Cardiff City phone-in with Steve Johnson and the lads, and maybe lasses, you never know. will be on at 7 p.m. So check that out. In the meantime, bid you farewell. Cheers.